Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the first topic that's part of Unit 3, supply. And in this unit, we're going to be looking at a couple of different concepts. The first one is the production function. And in the production function, we're going to be talking about how essentially inputs are turned into outputs. And we know that firms produce goods and services for sale by doing that, and they're transforming these inputs, which are sometimes called resources, into outputs or final goods and services that are then purchased by another firm. The production function, which is really what this first topic is just a mathematical function that describes the relationship between the inputs and the outputs. Now, when we talk about inputs, one of the concepts is we have to divide them into a couple of different types. So for example, the first type is an input whose quantity is fixed for a certain period of time. And that's typically things like the amount of land and the amount of machinery or tools, or essentially called capital resources, that are available. And if it's fixed in terms of quantity, we call it a fixed resource or fixed input, right? Fixed input or fixed resource. And for an input where the quantity can be changed by the firm at relatively any time, it's usually what we call labor, so we call that a variable input, right? And variable input. So the difference is really just, can they vary the quantity or not? And you might think like, well, how could you really vary the quantity of labor? Well, you could tell your labor, for instance, in a restaurant, you could say, it's kind of slow today, so we're going to send you home early. The third and fourth ideas here are time periods. And so there's a definition for a time period that is too brief for firms to change the plant capacity. In other words, how much they can produce. And so in this time period, land and capital are fixed in the short run. So we call this the short run, actually. So it's a short run time period. In the long run, right? In the long run, all of the different inputs, it's long enough for them to change plant capacity. So all of the inputs, capital, land, and labor, are variable. So all inputs, we could say, are variable in the long run. So sometimes you'll hear us refer in this class to long run versus short run, or variable inputs and fixed inputs, and that's all that we're really talking about here. And the other key term to know when we talk about the production function is something called marginal product. And this is just the additional product from an additional, input. So we could say that, like, for example, the marginal product of labor would be to say, when we add a unit of labor, what's the marginal product of adding each unit of labor? And if we had, for example, instead of units of labor here, if we said that this was machines, we had 1 machine, 2 machine, 3 machine, 4 machine, we could say the additional product of capital would be, marginal product of capital would be the same listed over here. So marginal product is the additional product that we generate from an additional unit of an input. And it's really the total product, right? Change in total product divided by the change in units of labor. So if you want to, you could say it's change in TP, because this is total product, divided by the change in quantity of input, or that quantity of labor. So I'll kind of give you that where you can see there. So let's go ahead and do that. Now the first unit, we can assume that there was a 0th unit of labor with 0 total product. And so between the 0th unit and 8, we'd say the marginal product is 8. That first unit of labor gave us 8 total product. The next unit of labor, when we go from 1 to 2, gives us 8 to 18, so that's 10. The next unit of labor gives us 18 to 26, so that's 8, right? And then 26 to 32 is 6, and 32 to 36 is 4, and 2, and here we have -2. And what we find is that the marginal product initially goes up, it goes from 8 to 10, and then gradually decreases until it finally goes negative. With total product, it's going to go up for a significantly larger amount of time. It'll peak here, and then it'll go down, but it doesn't go negative, and we'd assume that the company isn't going to continue to employ workers after that 7th one. So we can go ahead and graph actually the production function and the marginal product function using this data. So for this one, we're going to say quantity of labor on the horizontal axis, or on the x-axis here. And on the y-axis, we're going to say the marginal product here and the total product here. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for these. And so those are the quantities of labor. And for the first unit of labor up here, the total product was 8 and the marginal product was 8. So we're going to say, just for to keep this simple here, 40, 30, 20, and 10. And we'll say this one is 15 and 10 and 5. And that's just kind of by eyeballing what's our maximum value is probably 40 up here. So 8, that's going to be roughly here, and 2 is at 18, so that's going to be roughly there. 3 is 26, so that's going to be about there. 32, that's going to be roughly about there. 36, there. 38, there, and then 36 there. So if we kind of connect these, you get this nice kind of looking graph like that. And for the marginal product function, right, we're going to say 1 is, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's 8. 2 is 10. And 3 is 8. And 4 is 6. And then 5 is 4. And then we have 6 units of labor gives us 2. And our 7th unit of labor actually gives us -2 down here. So we kind of get this shape. So what we can find here, a couple of observations. First, there's a really rapid increase initially of total product, like that up there, due to the specialization of workers. And in fact, that's what's happening in this range, right? The workers are specializing here, and they're specializing relatively early in here, right? So right between those, in that first few, there's specialization going on. And then, at a certain point, less capital per worker. That's the idea that we have less resources per worker, and so each worker is going to be able to generate less output, diminishing output, right? But we're still going to have, total product is still going to be rising, but we have diminishing, what we call diminishing marginal returns. And this returns means that output, diminishing marginal output or product to labor. And we can generalize and actually say that with any input, whether this was labor or whether this was machines or anything, that there would be diminishing marginal returns to that particular thing, as long as we had the other thing fixed. So in thinking about the simulation we did in class, we did a simulation where you had a fixed number of scissors and staplers, but you had a variable number of workers. And so that as you continue to add workers, they were able to generate less and less returns per worker. And it doesn't even matter, the quality of those workers could have been outstanding, but by the time you get to that 6th, 7th, and 8th worker, they just can't squeeze more blood from a stone. So hopefully this helps you understand a little bit of some of the basics to the production function, and I'll see you next time.